Alright, I am done with my favorite thing ever, which is shopping. I have finally, all of my fabric has finally come in. And I went to Joann's to get, mostly it was the boring stuff, but I'm here to show you what fabrics Ashura is going to be. I got some matte white satin, which is called, I'm not saying that out loud, I am not French, so, but basically it is a matte white satin for the underdress. I chose this because I really didn't want it to be shiny. I feel like that would detract from the costume. And it's a good medium weight satin, so it's really good for dresses. And yeah, I'm going to use that for the underdress. I also got some really pretty gold lace, which I want to put over the skirt of the underdress. I'm still not 100% sure how I'm going to do this part because I bought it mainly because I liked how the bottom of it is. Unfortunately, the hem is curved on the dress like normal skirts are. So I'm not exactly sure how I'm gonna do this part yet. I think I'm just gonna like gather it at the waist and then have it just like overlay. But I need to do some experiments and whatnot. But even if I don't end up using this, it is really pretty. I'll probably use it for something else like Sakizo or something. And thankfully I already had black satin, which is the same kind of satin that the white one is. It's a matte black satin. Thankfully I have enough for an OB. As I made sure that I had enough so I didn't have to buy more. For the kimono, I already showed this, there goes the zipper. For the kimono, I already showed the fabric for it, but I plan on using this. There is a fabric sample there. I am a mess. This is the sheer fabric for the kimono, which really needs to be ironed. And then I also bought this really pretty brocade that I want to use for like trim around the sleeve hem and also like the neckband. And then I went to Joann's and I got some stuff. Well, this is washable stabilizer for something else. I got Velcro, a stupid amount of interfacing because I ran out, matching thread. It's always important to get thread. And then I also got some horsehair braid for the hem of the underdress. I have never used horsehair braid ever in any cosplay I have ever done in the past 23 years. But I bought it because, well, I wanted to try it out and see how it goes. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. That's all of the fabrics. So now the other way, this way, that way. I never know which direction to point, but now I'm going to start on the white underdress, and yeah, so stay tuned in like 2 seconds for that, I guess. Cool. Is it that way or that way? I never know. To start off with the dress, I started with the skirts because those were the biggest pieces that I had to pin and cut out. Especially since one piece is cut on a fold. So I started with that first. Once I had the skirt pieces pinned, I then moved on to pinning the bodice pieces to the satin. Once I had all the pieces pinned to the fabric, I then just cut everything out. Here I've pinned on the bodice pieces to the twill so that I can cut them out and then sew them together. After I've cut everything out, I then overlock stitched the edges of my satin so it would prevent it from fraying. I don't have a serger, so I use this stitch a lot. It's quite tedious and it takes a while, but I just put on some good music and rock out while I overlock. After overlocking everything, I then pinned all the seams together on both the satin and twill layers and sewed them all together. Once I have both of them sewn together, I pinned the lining and the satin at the top, matching all of the seams, so that I could get started on doing the boning channels. Once I sewed the top together, I just clipped the corners, or clipped the curves rather, and then trimmed the seam a little bit so that it will iron flat. And here I am ironing that seam open so that I can turn it right side out and then iron it flat. See how flat that is? It looks so good. Once I ironed that flat, I then did a very close edge stitch to the top just to reinforce it. That's how it looks before I put in the boning channels. It looks so crisp and smooth. In order to make the boning channels, I matched the seams of both layers and pinned them together. I did it this way so the seams stay put while I sew in the boning channels. I'm not sure if this is the right method, but I've been making boning channels this way on my corsets for years. To sew the channels, I sew very closely to the seam line, and then I sew again about 3/8 of an inch away from that stitch line. After sewing the boning channels, I measure a seam allowance at the waistline and then measure the length of the channel minus the seam allowance to get the proper length of boning. Once I have the measurements, I pull out my box of boning to find boning that are the right length for each channel. I mainly use white steel boning and spiral steel boning as they give me more support for my tatas. Once I have my boning, I insert them into the channels. Next up is doing the skirt, but I forgot to film making the skirt, but basically you just sew all the seams together and you make a massive skirt. Once I did that, I then started pinning on the horsehair braid to the hem of the skirt. And then I sewed it on with the machine. Once I finished that, I ironed it on the inside, and then I hand sewed it to the skirt using a blind stitch so that you couldn't see it on the outside of the skirt. And I'm really happy with how this turned out. Once I got the horsehair braid on, it was time to work on the gold lace overlay, where I measured the length of the skirt and then measured it a few inches longer so that it would overlay nicely. And here I'm just making sure that I cut the lace straight. Once I did that, I hand gathered it in place and then basted it to the skirt. And then I sewed it to the skirt with the machine and then cut off the excess gathers. Once I did that, I then pinned the bodice and the skirt together at the waist seam. Once I pinned it together, I then sewed the waist seam through my machine. After that, I installed the zipper to try and finish this dress off. Okay, so I have mainly finished the dress, but I am having some fitting issues right now, which is really starting to make me angry. So the top of my dress, which I had patterned to be a little bit bigger, is now too big. Up here, somehow, some way, and I've already adjusted the zipper in the back, which you can barely see. Right now I just have the top pinned in place. But it's still not even enough for this to not accidentally have a nip slip, which I do not want happening. So the only other solution I can think of is redoing the bodice, which pisses me off because I've already finished pretty much the whole dress. The skirt's attached, everything's attached. The boning is in, the lace is hand sewn on, and it doesn't fit my boobies. And I don't know what to do. So right now I have it fit as tight as I can get it. I even have some, they're not cutlets, but you know, they're called the titty cups. I shoved them in there and it's still not quite working. And I don't think I have lost a tremendous amount of weight. In fact, I know I haven't lost any weight since I started this costume, so I don't quite know where I went wrong. Because the mock-up fit, and this doesn't fit. So I don't know what went wrong, and I might just move on to the kimono and work on this later once I can figure out a better plan of how to either fix what I currently have or if I have to redo it, which is gonna make me frustrated because the seam here is trimmed, which doesn't bode well, so I don't know what I'm going to do right now. This is pissing me off. This is the world of cosplay. This is what happens. I don't know if I can take the zipper in anymore, because now it's just getting into a territory that I'm afraid to go, but I'll probably try one more time to try and fix it with just using the zipper, but I don't think that's gonna work, because this top is too loose where it should not be loose. I would like it tighter for more security, and it's currently literally, you can just, what the F. Alright, so anyway, I have that to figure out. I don't know what's gonna happen next, but I am behind. I've only gotten the dress somewhat done, and the bodice doesn't fit. I need to work on the kimono. I need to do the neck piece. I need to order a wig. I need to do horns and the obi, and then there's also a red sash. Granted, some of those won't take me long, but at the same time, it's like, how did I procrastinate so bad? Okay, so I am finally done with the white dress. I did have a panic attack a little bit because the top was not fitting around my bust as well as I was hoping, but I did manage to fix it by adjusting the zipper in the back. It's probably not the most professional thing to do, or at least the way that I did it, but technically I think what I should have done was just remade the whole bodice, but by that point I had already attached the skirt, and I don't think there would have been an easy way for me to reattach the skirt to a new bodice, so I just took in the zipper in the most roundabout cutting corner sort of way. So with the dress, I did hand sew some of the extra lace I had left over onto the top because I really liked how that looked. And then I did a horsehair braid hem, which I really like how that turned out because I did a blind stitch on the bottom, even though you technically can't see it with the lace over it. The bottom of the skirt, the white skirt, looks so good, and I'm so proud of myself on that. I did, I think earlier in some prior videos, you saw me putting in a straight boning for the bodice and these bust seams. I did switch it out for spiral steel boning because it was laying flatter until I tried it on and realized it was too big up here. But regardless, it is boned. I can wear it and be supported. So yeah. And then the lace overlay skirt, I think I gathered about almost 4 yards maybe of the 5 yards of lace that I bought. When I did all 5 yards of the lace, it was this. So I cut it down a little bit so that it wasn't so massive. And yeah, I just gathered it all at the top. I sewed these two pieces together, and yeah, now it's done. Now to move on to the kimono, which the pieces are actually sitting over there. That's why I'm pointing that way. So yes, let's continue sewing because I'm behind. Now focusing on the kimono, I had already cut out all of my pieces, and I also overlock stitched all of the edges the same way I did the satin. Once all of the pieces were overlocked, I then started working on the main part of the kimono. I started off by sewing the shoulder seams together and then ironing those seams open. After that was done, I started working on the sleeves, which are just basically very large rectangles. I am so grateful I did not have to end up French seaming any of this kimono as I thought I was going to, and I figured out a good overlock stitch so I could avoid doing French seams everywhere. I absolutely hate doing French seams. They're so annoying even though they look so good. Once the sleeves were sewn together, I then attached the sleeves underneath the shoulder seam of the kimono. I'm actually following pattern instructions here, which has you do this first before you sew the side seams. Once I have both sleeves attached where they're supposed to be attached, I then pinned my side seams together and sew them together. After I got the kimono all sewn together, then it's time to start working on the neckband. So here I cut out my neckband out of my brocade and I'm interfacing it so that it remains stiff. Before attaching the neckband, I did have to hem my kimono. Unfortunately, I was also hindered at times by the cat sleeping on my costume with no shits to give. Alright, I'm not sure if this is going to end up in the final video or not, but at least in the video, this whole process is sped up, right? But for me, it's been like 3 or 4 months. And unfortunately, the past week or so, I haven't really been able to do much sewing because if you couldn't tell, I got sick. I'm still a little sick. And I'm currently on antibiotics. And it kind of makes me feel like shit. So, I haven't been able to sew as much. And I generally don't like sewing while I'm sick because I tend to make stupid mistakes, which is exactly what happened. So while I was just bored, I decided to do the sleeve bands for my kimono, which you can kind of see back here. And just today, while I'm feeling a little bit better despite the side effects of the antibiotic, I realized I cut the strips just too short, despite measuring 3 times. So, at the moment, I am debating between 2 things, which is either making the sleeve circumference, I guess, a little smaller to fit what I've already cut out, or cutting the bands out again, except I can't interface it like I did with these, because I don't have enough interfacing for those plus the obi. But I have enough brocade to cut them out again, so I might do that instead, because I don't think they really need to be interfaced. My third option is just to go to bed and contemplate my poor decisions. Maybe I should do that. Pro tip, or veteran cosplayer tip, don't sew while you're sick. Because you make stupid mistakes, such as despite measuring 3 times, you still get it wrong. I don't know how that happened. But yeah, despite all of that, I highly doubt I'm going to make my arbitrary deadline, because I just ordered the wig. I did order other supplies for the horns, some of the jewels for the neck piece. I still haven't figured out if I'm making the neck piece out of craft foam or fabric or what. I need to figure that out. But yeah, I'm probably gonna miss my deadline, but it's fine. The only reason why I had finished it in April is because in my backyard we have what I call the azalea wall, and it's literally just a wall of overgrown azaleas that we haven't really trimmed since we moved in. And it's really pretty when it blooms because it's pink and it's pretty and it's, you know, it's really cool, and I wanted to take photos in front of it with this costume. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen because they're already starting to bloom. That isn't ready. I don't even have a wig. I don't have horns done. I don't have the neck piece done. The only thing that's done is the dress and like 90% of the kimono. It's fine. There's always next year for spring. Shit happens. It is what it is. At this point, I'm just rambling, and I don't know why. Probably because I need to lay down and stop talking. After getting over my mystery illness, I started working on the obi. I'm using my obi pattern that I had made earlier. I'm cutting it out of 2 layers of that matte black satin. I did 2 layers so that I could interface both sides to make sure that the obi does not lose its shape. After I cut it out, I then cut out 2 layers of interfacing, because that obi is going to be stiff. And then I ironed the interfacing onto the satin. After interfacing my obi, I decided I wanted to do some boning just to make sure that it keeps its shape. After interfacing my obi, I measure out where to place my boning and ended up with about 6 to 8 boning channels. The boning I used was actually some plastic that was wrapped around a furniture package, as I don't have any plastic boning. My boning channels were made from single fold bias tape that I sewed down on my channel markings. I then cut the bias tape down to size to fit the boning channels. Then I cut the so-called boning to the length of the boning channels, minus a seam allowance so I don't accidentally sew over it. After that, I kind of trim the ends of each bone into a curve so they don't hook through the stitching once it's there. And then I just insert them all into the boning channels. Once that's done, I attach both sides of the obi to each other and pin and sew them together. After I sewed it together, I clip the corners a little bit. I iron the seam allowances so that it makes it easier for me to turn it inside out, so that once I do, it'll lay flat-ish. Once I turn it inside out, I then iron it again. And then I also hold it in the end so that I could sew it closed. Once that was done, and once I sewed on some hooks and eyes at the end, I took some white and gold trim that I had bought originally for the bodice, and I ended up using it for the obi instead, just to give it a little bit more pizzazz. So here I am using some fabric glue to glue it on. Once I did that, I used my embroidery machine and did one of the preset designs and just embroidered it on some black satin, and then I just kind of sewed that on to the obi to give it a little bit more pizzazz, because I thought it was a little too plain looking, so I just did that instead. Also, I wanted to play with some of the designs on my embroidery machine, so I figured that was a good excuse. Moving on to the neck piece, I decided ultimately in the end to make it out of craft foam. So here I am trying to figure out the pattern for it, trying to figure out the scale and sizes of the different elements of the neck piece, which took a little bit of trial and error, which you will see, as I have to end up using 3 different pens in the end because I kept messing up like the scale of things. Also, I highly recommend you guys get a protractor because it makes it so much easier to draw circles. And I don't know why I never thought about using a freaking protractor. It made things so much easier. Once I figured out at least half of the pattern, I ended up tracing it onto a piece of paper so that I could then fold it in half and then have a full pattern piece to make sure that I have the scale of everything right before I move on to working on it in craft foam. Once I folded the paper in half, I just traced it through the paper, and then boom, done. After that, I cut it out. Here I am just checking the scale of it to make sure that it works, and on myself. Once I had the pattern done, I then created the test mock-up of the neck piece in foam just to make sure that it worked. And once I knew that it did, I basically did the same thing over again. I just tried to do it much cleaner than I did before. So now I'm just taking my pattern and I'm basically deconstructing it into a puzzle so that I can cut all the pieces out of foam and do it nicely. Once I had everything cut out, you just put the puzzle together, and then eventually you just glue everything together. I used fabric glue for this, which is probably not the best glue to use. I didn't have any contact cement. However, it did work. It still works, as the neck piece is still in one piece. So that does work. It is a little bit messy though, because it does tend to leak out of the seams, so I was trying to wipe away as much as I could before it dried, so that there wouldn't be any glue bits sticking out. Once I had everything glued flat, I then heat shaped everything to my neck and made sure that the resin gems I had already made, basically that big purple one, was still going to glue on flat. So it took a lot of heating, a lot of shaping, and a lot of praying, but it worked out in the end. Moving on to the resin gems, I ended up using UV resin, which was a lot easier for me to work with. So I got clear resin and I got some colored UV resin as well, along with, that says, I think, chameleon flakes. They're just like glitter flakes that you can put in your resin. I also got a variety of round silicone molds of different sizes so I could make different sized gems, and even whatever that is. It's so squishy. To start mixing the resin, I started off with the clear stuff, and then I just started putting in red and orange resin into the cup and mixing it to try and get the color that I want. I did end up mixing a little bit of purple in there as well. And then I put in the gold flakies to make it sparkle, mix that together, and start pouring them in the molds. After I put them in the molds, I then put them under a UV light per the directions of the kit, and what do you know? I got gems, and it was easy peasy. Now that my neck piece is heat shaped and whatnot, I tried to fill in any cracks or some of the seams with some foam clay, which I don't think really ended up working quite as well as I thought it would, but because I was running out of time, I just went with it. After that, I added about 3 coats of Mod Podge to seal it in before I started painting. To start painting, I wanted to paint the whole thing with a white base, since the craft foam is orange. And I used this shimmer paint here. However, as you'll eventually see, I start to panic because it is so sheer. I did end up mixing just plain white acrylic paint in with it, just to get it more opaque. And to continue with my paint problems, I tried to paint all of the yellow parts that gold color, but it's also sheer. So cue me trying to panic, wondering why I spent all this money on gold paint that's freaking sheer. So I got more acrylic paint to try and make it more opaque. And here I just started mixing colors to try and get it as close as possible to the paint that I wanted it to be. It took a lot of guessing and mixing and hoping that I can get it somewhat close to the color I was thinking. And then it still ended up being kind of sheer. At this point, I was getting really frustrated with all of my paint problems, but thankfully after ranting about this to a friend, she suggested I use rub and buff, which I eventually did. I also ended up cutting off the bottom of my neck piece because when I tried it on, I realized it was too tall for my neck, and I was kind of having issues wearing it, so I just cut the bottom off, and it was so much better and more comfortable after that. After I cut that bit off, I just continued adding more accent paint and adding more paint details to the neck piece. Now I'm starting to glue on the small little gems because I was getting really impatient and I wanted to see how it was going to look with the gems in. So here I am using my fabric tack to glue in the gems. I have to say I really like this glue. It works very well. So I bought some rub and buff and the trim looks so much better after putting that on. It's much more opaque and it's much closer to the color that I originally wanted. Now here I'm adding more details again with the rub and buff, just very carefully adding those gold details to the neck piece. here we are several months later after the beginning of this video, of this whole project. And I'm supposed to have at least 2 costumes done by now, and I only have 1. Just 1. But it's fine. Life happens, and it's okay. To be fair, this project, well, the sewing part wasn't bad. The reason why it took so long is because, aside from real life stuff happening, I could not figure out how to make this thing. So I spent a long time trying to think of the best way to make this neck piece, which is the one thing that is in the reference image, is this necklace along with just the face and the horns. So it took me quite a bit of thinking of how to make this, and even after I have made this, I have thought of better ways to make it now that I've made 1. So I might revisit this in the future to try and remake it. I don't know if I will have the brain capacity to do it because I would like to move on and to work on other things, personal and cosplay wise. I have a pile of Lego sets I need to build. I have been ignoring them. I keep adding to it and then I don't build it. Hi guys, I'm just popping in here while I'm editing this super long video, and I realized that I never mentioned that I made a separate wig video for how I did the Ashura wig. So I will post the link to that somewhere over here, so you can watch and see how I made the Ashura wig and the horns, and the little headpiece thing. I also realized that I never really mentioned what I actually thought of the costume, other than me complaining about the neck piece, which went downhill pretty fast while I was making it. Mostly because I just wasn't happy with the material that I ended up using, and I might have figured out another way to do it. But as for the rest of the costume, I was pretty happy with how it turned out. It was pretty easy to wear. I don't recommend wearing a big ball gown in downtown DC like I did, but otherwise it was really easy to wear. I'm really proud of some of the new techniques that I learned while making this costume, such as mostly the horsehair braid hem on the white dress. It turned out so good, and I'm so happy. I'm very happy with how the wig turned out, and the horns. I'm glad I used magnets. It was really nice to just stick them on my head, and since I made them out of foam clay, they were pretty sturdy and resilient. Alright, now back to me babbling. I think it's this way. This way? That way? I don't know. Anyway, back to me rambling. Bye. I didn't make, I think they're earrings, but there's like a lot of other things in this area that I did not make because I haven't quite figured that one out yet. I have some working theories. I might, like I said, I might revisit it later at another time if I really want to play with or experiment with what I want. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe, and I am very happy if you watched this entire video. Hopefully you might have learned something, or you might have banged your head against the desk about why I did something a certain way. But yes, like and subscribe. Yes. And I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.